Good morning. And it's nice to be with you again. Here we are. And the one of the themes for today, looking at the second noble truth, will be letting go. And Buddhism is often associated with letting go, and that can both be inspiring and depressing. It can be challenging, the idea of it, and even more so the practice of it. And one of the things that helps with the idea of letting go is that we're not necessarily letting go of anything, anything in the world, any people, any even qualities or things inside of us, but we are letting go of the clinging to those. The clinging to things is intimately part of what suffering is. And as long as we cling, there is a kind of suffering in the clinging. And so letting go of clinging, of grasping, of holding on, and that includes resisting and pushing away. And so this combination of letting things be and letting go of the clinging to things, those two can come together. And so today, maybe we just practice letting go of clinging, the holding, the grasping. And the letting go that we do, the clinging that we do, manifests itself in our bodies with tension and holding. It manifests itself in our emotional life, and they get frozen and tight and knotted up. And they get manifested in our thoughts, our thought constructions, our ideas, the stories we have, and how also we get knotted up in them. They get knotted up and tied up and swirl around in whirlpools of thought that we get pulled into. So we'll look at letting go during this sitting. So to sit upright, or sit in a way, meditate in a posture that's your posture for meditation. And taking a meditation posture is both a gain of some good posture, hopefully, but it's also letting go of many of the other postures we could be in. Some of those postures are postures of tension and holding and pushing and hurrying. So there is a letting go, even to sit down to meditate. If you close your eyes, there's a letting go of needing to see, searching with the eyes, looking and wanting, that happens through the eyes, wanting to see something. But letting the eyes rest in their sockets. Letting go of seeing. Letting go. And then in this body of ours, sitting here, this process of letting go, releasing, holding, is done physically. Perhaps there's some obvious muscles in your body that can soften, release, let go. The muscles of the face. And not having those muscles of the face pulled in tight to the skull. Letting the muscles ease up on the face, easing up on the forehead, easing up around the eyes, easing up around the cheeks and the jaw, You might drop your mouth open for a moment so the jaw can relax a bit, and then gently float your mouth back together. And then perhaps you can also relax your shoulders, letting go of the tension, at least some of the tension there. Softening in the chest, letting go of some of the grip, clinging, holding, contracting that might exist in the chest. And then relaxing, letting go in the belly. Softening in the belly. And sometimes the holding of the body is in the whole body. The pulling of the body in. A tension, it's kind of lifts the body up, parts of it. Often out of fear or sense of alarm. Sometimes deeply conditioned, deeply embedded almost in the marrow of the bones. And to ease up on that holding, soften. And sometimes the only release of clinging we can do is releasing the clinging, the idea that things should be different than they are, how they are now. And these minutes of meditation, maybe there's a kind of meaningful form of letting go that anything needs to be different for these moments. Letting go of clinging to that, insisting on it, expecting it to be different. And there's also clinging, tightening, constricting in the mind, the thinking muscle. It isn't that thinking is a problem, but it's the clinging, the holding, the pushing, the engagement with thinking that is in the insistence to think. And sometimes it's possible to feel the extra energy that goes into thinking. The energy of grasping, craving, clinging, wanting, needing. The energy of trying hard to figure something out. And as you exhale, to relax and soften. Relax the thinking muscle. And then settling into your breathing. And the exhale is also a kind of letting go. Both letting go of the top of the inhale. And as you exhale, releasing the rib cage, the diaphragm, the belly. Perhaps you can also release, let go of your thoughts. Whatever thoughts that have come in, gently allow them to go and let go into the experience of breathing. And every time you exhale, if anything has grabbed you, or there's any craving or wanting, or see if you can let go of the wanting. Let go of things needing to be different. Let go of any craving, clinging. Letting go into the simplicity of breathing, the simplicity of a body, alive, sensing, feeling, living body. Just here, letting go into this time and this place, letting go. remembering to let go. Letting go with the exhale. Not letting go of anything. Letting go of the holding and the clinging. So that the fist of the mind opens. The fist in the heart opens. So the fist of the body opens. So that letting go is also an opening up, a freeing up. Letting go with every exhale. Opening with every exhale. Learning the art of letting go is at the heart of Buddhism. But it's not indiscriminate letting go. It's wise letting go. It's a letting go that we clearly benefit from letting go. Perhaps we can learn to let go of a closed heart, the ways in which we are not open to others or to the world, to let go of what is closed in us. To release the heart, to open the heart's sensitivity, that inner capacity to feel care, love, compassion, so that in letting go, these beautiful qualities within are there to be the way we respond to the world. And may it be that all the ways that we let go open us to a greater care and goodwill, kindness to the world around us. May we let go and let go of how we are defensive, contracted, scared, so that we don't allow ourselves to care, to love. And may it be that coming out of this meditation today, that we continue to let go through the day. Let go of what barriers you have in your heart. To be present for others. To feel, experience, and care for others. And may our care for others, our open heart, be translated into deeds of body, speech, and mind, of making this world a better place for all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free. So then we continue with the fourth talk on the second noble truth. And the first noble, and I'm offering different interpretations of the second noble truth, of the four noble truths in general. And the value of these different interpretations is that each of them is a different pragmatic or practical way of exploring and being and freeing ourselves from our suffering. Rather than seeing the Four Noble Truths as a doctrine, a fixed doctrine that has a fixed interpretation, fixed understanding, it's possible to see it as a framework that can be applied to understand our life in different ways, all for the purpose of becoming freer and freer of suffering. And sometimes the first Monday's interpretation is really useful. The causal interpretation, that there's a cause to suffering. And if you can understand that cause, you can maybe do something about the suffering by changing the cause, letting go of it. Sometimes it's useful to look at it, the conditionality of suffering, the conditions for why suffering is there, and all the different pieces that come together to build up together to create suffering. And sometimes we don't take care of the cause, but we change the conditions. And then the third interpretation yesterday is the inconstancy interpretation, the looking at how thoroughly and completely things are constantly shifting and changing, appearing and disappearing. And somehow in the inconstancy of experience, it's clear that kind of the grip of clinging begins to release. We start seeing freedom, because the inconstancy, as we go through these three interpretations, it's like it's really going deeper and deeper in the mind, a stiller, quieter, more attentive mind that's not overlaying a lot of ideas on top of things. And when we start seeing the fundamental inconstant flow of experience in deep meditation, it's really clear that there's freedom in that flow, freedom in between the things that exist. And that flow and that helps really release some of the deepest kinds of holding we have. It's the liberating insight, liberating interpretation. Today, the fourth interpretation I'm going to offer is the interpretation that talks about the origin of suffering. And some translators actually translate this word Samudaya, that means arising, in the second noble truth, as the noble truth of the origin of suffering. And so why did they do origin? So this has something to do with, a lot to do, I believe, with the Buddha's so-called first discourse. After the Buddha was enlightened, he went out to find his 6 previous companions in the ascetic life, because he thought they were ready to hear the deeper teachings he had now about liberation, enlightenment. And it said that when he came to them, he taught them the Four Noble Truths. And the second noble truth, in a kind of simple Dharma teaching maybe, I don't know if simple is the right word, but we'll often say that the second noble truth, the cause of suffering, is craving. The condition is craving. And that comes from that idea, comes from that first sermon of the Buddha, and where it begins this way. Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth, and this is Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Now this, bhikkhus, is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It is this craving. So there it is. It is this craving. But I think many times when Dharma teachers and even scholars are writing about the second noble truth, they stop there. It's craving. And it's useful to look at craving, the thirst, clinging, this craving, this strong desire, compulsive desire. But actually the passage goes on further, and the rest of it is often not discussed so much. It is this craving which, so here we go, the craving which, we're talking about a particular kind of craving now. So what is the origin of suffering in this translation? What is the origin? It is the craving which what? It's the craving which leads, it's going to go somewhere. So it's kind of like a cause, it leads someplace. So where does it lead? So a particular kind of craving that leads someplace. It is the craving which leads to renewed existence, to be reborn, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That is craving. So here they're going to kind of say it in different words, what that craving is. Craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, and craving for extermination, for non-existence. So this is a kind of intense passage, and for some people trying to understand what the Four Noble Truths are about, it's a surprise to come across this particular explanation for what the Second Noble Truth is, because it focuses on rebirth. It's the particular craving which leads to rebirth, and the craving that human beings have in a previous life, the craving to be reborn, is the origin of a person's next life. And it's also then the origin of all the suffering that person has in their next life. So in this interpretation, this understanding of rebirth in multiple lives, all the suffering that you have in this lifetime has its origin in a craving to be reborn. And the solution to not being reborn again and again into this world of suffering is to let go of a particular kind of craving, the craving of wanting to have rebirth. And that's where we get this idea that the Second Noble Truth has to do with the origin. Even though, as I keep saying, the word Samudaya means arising. And so yesterday I talked about these four liberating insights, insight into this is suffering, this is the arising of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, and this is the practice leading to the cessation of suffering. And I offered that interpretation here, which I think is well representing what the Buddha was teaching over and over again. That little formula, without the words Noble Truth, appears hundreds of times in the suttas. People often think the Buddha is talking about the Four Noble Truths because it's so similar in wording, but he's talking about inconstancy, the immediacy of experience here and now. This explanation here in the first discourse of the Buddha is much more abstract. It's not about the immediacy of present moment experience. It's about a story, an idea, a belief in rebirth, and an idea of how rebirth happens. It's a theory about rebirth. And now we've left the world of direct experience, at least in terms of a reader of this and what's being pointed to kind of a belief, kind of a tenet, kind of a creed, that this is the problem of suffering, is the fact that we want to be reborn, and that we do get reborn. So now we have to now it's like some people are kind of maybe reeling to hear this. What? This is getting more complicated. I didn't know. I thought practice and mindfulness was just about the present moment experience, seeing it here and now, deep insight into how things are here and now. And now we're talking about this fundamental teaching of Buddhism, that of the Four Noble Truths, that in order to understand it, you have to understand rebirth and believe that there's a craving that causes rebirth. And how do I get to this root craving, or this origin of suffering? For some of us, it's not so satisfying. Some of us, it's very inspiring to hear this. People who believe in rebirth really want to see how to get off the wheel of life and death. People who don't believe in it so much, it's like, it's a little bit confusing, or a little bit maybe even off-putting to have this wonderful teaching of the Four Noble Truths be interpreted in this way. One way of understanding this, and I received this from one of the great scholar monks, this idea, is that this discourse of the Buddha's first sermon is not meant to be the definitive teachings of the Four Noble Truths, but rather is a very particular elaboration of how someone when someone becomes fully awakened, like becomes a Buddha, how then they no longer get reborn. And then the idea is, well, how does that happen? How do they no longer get reborn? Well, they're explaining this, that for that person, the particular craving for rebirth has been uprooted, has been stopped. So rather than the Buddha's first sermon being the kind of the universal teachings on the Four Noble Truths that we can understand for our lives, it's rather a very particular application of this framework to look and explain how someone who becomes fully awakened has been changed, a particular mechanism for that thing. And so it's relevant for someone who's fully awakened, not necessarily for someone who's just trying to become free and in this lifetime itself, as they go through their lives. So this is a little more complicated, this whole idea, but I think it's important for those of you who are engaged in Buddhism and trying to reflect on the Four Noble Truths, and you're trying to go back and see the teachings of the Buddha, to try to make sense of these teachings, the first sermon of the Buddha, and to contextualize it, and to really kind of understand the particularity of what the focus is on here. So we're not kind of confused or think we have to kind of now adopt a tenet and all that of belief or apply this particular teachings to our practice. So the origin of suffering, the origin means the original place in the past life that gives birth to the suffering here. Some translators will do kind of will translate this word samudaya, meaning arising, as origination. And some of you reading the different translators will see this. I'm not sure what this means, origination. I know the dictionary definition. I think maybe it just means origin, or maybe it's a kind of hybrid or kind of a vague way of kind of talking about conditionality, kind of talking about origin, kind of talking about not the fundamental original origin, but rather where suffering originates, any place you can see it originating in, the conditions for it, the more immediate cause in today or in current times. So whichever way it is, these interpretations, it's all material to swim in, to work with, to apply to our lives. And the test of all this, the purpose of all this, is to be able to be present with clear eyes, looking clearly into our life, understanding what we're doing, how we're living, where the clinging, what the craving is, and then to understand how it's useful to work through that to come to the other side of suffering. Sometimes it's useful to see cause, sometimes condition, sometimes inconstancy, and maybe sometimes seeing the origin is useful or important to understand. This is part of it. And we'll kind of review all this again in a very kind of hopefully practical way next week when we talk about the nirodha, the cessation of suffering. But for now, we're still looking at this second noble truth, and we have one more talk tomorrow. So I look forward to making efforts again to explain this to you, and hopefully you're finding it practical. Thank you.